Here we are, back to episode 4 of the Visionary Minds podcast. Here with Danielle Bohmir. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
It's actually Bohmir, but Bohmir. I like Bohmir.
Okay, well, Bohmir, however you want to pronounce it, Danielle. Happy to have her here. She's one of the people I had from the very beginning in my mind that I'd like to have on. So I'm really happy to have her on. Welcome, Danielle.
I'm really excited to be here.
I'm glad. So why don't you just, tell us a little bit about yourself, things that you're interested in, topics as they relate, all that.
Well, I think that the two things that I've always been interested in my entire life are psychology and writing. And when I say psychology, I mean like human nature, the nature of reality, existence, patterns that are found in consciousness. Trying to find ways to open other people's minds to these ideas in ways that that they can help themselves and thus others through that ripple effect. So I'm passionate about that. I have my bachelor's degree in psychology. I'm planning to go back to school for graduate school, clinical counseling.
That's awesome.
So what I'm interested in doing is helping people who are either having death crises or psychedelic or existential crises.
And well, that's one of the primary areas that they've already, there's some early research, goes towards that sort of thing. It obviously has incredible potential for that sort of thing. So that's awesome that you're, pursuing psychology with a psychedelic sort of agenda in mind as you do it.
And I'm an advocate of psychedelic therapy as well. I also I like to study the politics behind psychedelic therapy too, but I mean, there's a lot that I don't know.
Yeah.
But, I think that it's fascinating the way that human systems end up unfolding under different cultures or cults or just those patterns and what it says about us.
Yeah, it's interesting how relative, and that's one of the things psychedelics can show you is like there's so much relativity in like all of these cultural expressions and all these things that we just take for granted as reality. Like, and you can see that, like you mentioned, cults or whatever the case may be. There can be subcultures that can develop that are so different, and to be in that environment, just recontextualizes everything. And you just realize how different things could be, even though we're so accustomed to and ingrained with things being one particular way.
Yeah, and I think that's important, and I think even more importantly, it's important to understand yourself and understand what that translation or transaction is between yourself and your environment, and find ways to behave or act more out of love for others. I mean, or to believe more in that sort of thing, to understand it, to be able to forgive and give compassion. Know, I think know thyself. That's important.
Yeah, well, I think it's a balance. That's one of the ultimate paradoxes of life. I think is the balance between care for self and care for others. Because
where that line is,
Yeah,
like this whole thing with the border crisis, like we're all having our own border crisis inside ourselves, all the time. And I mean, we're getting, not always, we get better. I don't mean it's always going to be a crisis, but it is for a lot of people because of this, because of the discrepancy between our culture and the way that our evolution has gotten us more used to being. We're being pressed to adapt.
Yeah, and I mean, Carl Jung talked about cultural crises being like manifestations of internal psychological crises. You know what I mean? So, the issues that exist out there in the world, at some level, can be brought back to the human psyche and like internal dilemmas that we have within ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So, I just want to open people's eyes to those kinds of ideas and maybe help outline tools that people can use.
Yeah, that's a great thing. There's always been a association between psychology and psychedelics, which is interesting and makes sense. Psychedelic literally means like mind manifesting, you know, or mind opening, which obviously relates to psychology, which is like the study of the psyche. So what have your like? You want to get into some personal experiences you've had with psychedelics, like the experiences you had, or how you've seen them,
Sure.
or whatever, something like that.
Yeah, I've probably used more LSD and DMT than I have a lot of other things. LSD because it was like one of the, well, I did mushrooms first, but LSD was the first psychedelic I used frequently in any way.
LSD was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. That was about 10 years ago, probably.
Okay.
Yeah, just a little more than 10 years ago, I got my psychedelic anniversary.
Okay, that's a monumentous occasion. That's wonderful.
Yeah. So, I don't know. There's been nothing else in my life that has felt more like home to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting the different types of experiences that you can have. You know what I mean? We use the term psychedelic like it's one thing, but like, and certainly with some of these substances, anyways, they're so unique that like to even just like, and some people almost conceptually do umbrella like they're almost the same thing, psychedelic, and like, you know, when you do, you know, LSD and you compare that to DMT, compare that to salvia, you compare that to ketamine or whatever, like these are like radically different experiences, and you know, we can use the term psychedelic, but when you have, for me, I can do different substances, and as I'm experiencing, I'm like, wow, this is unlike anything else I've ever experienced, and then you use a different substance and it's unlike anything else in a different way.
Yeah, they have different personalities, you know, different activations that they touch within us.
Yeah.
And it's always different. Yeah, DMT and DPT, I would say, are my favorite psychedelics.
That's the one you mentioned and you said that you loved, and I'm like, man, I have not tried that one yet. It sounds like definitely something worth trying. I haven't been able to do that yet.
There's some weird trip reports floating around about DPT right now, actually. Like, not because there's a problem, with the DPT or anything like that, but I'm talking about, like, I think that a lot of people have gotten DPT that was not as pure, because there was one time when I had an experience and the purity was a little bit less, and it was very tense on my body, and I didn't really like it, and then I kind of understood what some of the other trip reports were talking about, you know, people having tremors on it and things like that. But if it's good, and you know, you should always ask to see like a bioassay for the substance, you know, when you order it from somewhere.
Well, that's
the
issue.
I actually haven't ordered it for a long time. What was that?
Well, that's the issue. That's one of the primary issues with drugs being illegal in the first place. You know?
Yeah.
And this is why, you know, me personally, I don't know if everyone agrees with this. I personally, I believe in legalizing all substances, and the reason I believe that is just harm reduction. I just think. I just think, like, because of that reason, you know, it applies with psychedelics. It also applies with every single substance that people consume. If you don't know what's in it, and you're just having, if you don't know what's in it, and then that increases harm, because so many often it's more harmful things that are used. It's like many of the harmful effects of the worst effects that people have from some of these drugs are specifically because it's not a pure substance. It's all these impure stuff that they use just, you know, under kitchen chemists or whatever that are giving you the worst results. And if they just legalized it, then they would make it in the proper way, and this would minimize harm. So
it's really cool that you bring this up, because I actually was just writing something kind of on this topic about legal illusions. You know, about how when you illegalize something, you're not making it illegal just because you want to avoid people getting hurt. You're also doing it for like financial reasons. And I feel like when that happens, it's almost like guaranteed in some way. It's funny I use that word, but you know, that there will be more deception within it, because it's just having motivations like that throws people very off kilter, especially when the value of money is often very arbitrary.
Yeah. Well, so when you for cash
I know it's
incentives,
complex, but it's arbitrary ultimately.
cash. I mean, it definitely is. I mean,
Because most of it's electronic.
yeah. Well, nowadays, yeah, you're right. It really has almost no physical foundation. It's all speculative and determined
I'm
like
not
on.
saying it wouldn't throw the world into chaos. I'm not saying that, you know,
Wait,
but
are you saying legalizing all drugs or?
both. You know, legalizing all drugs or um, changing the laws so that they had more to do with keeping people safe than just
Yeah.
like making money.
Exactly, and it's just so obvious, like I said, and it's to me it's
It's an
so.
inherent flaw in our culture, our society, bureaucracy
Uh-huh.
specifically.
Wait, it's an
I think
inherent what?
bureaucracy and
Yeah,
specifically value in bureaucracy.
yeah. Well,
And I mean, I don't feel that good about getting into more details about this, just because I want to make sure that I know what I'm talking about, and I don't want to talk about the details if I don't know them.
right, and that's good, and you can have definitely there's genuine general insights you can have on
I'm
something
not
and
an
not
expert on economics, you
right,
know,
which is good.
but I do
It's
notice
annoying.
patterns.
Exactly. We can all observe so many
Yeah.
things in reality, and it's frustrating. Actually, it's annoying when people just talk like as if like, oh, I know everything, and like there's really like they don't even like a lot of people just have to give off the impression that they know everything. Like people, it's like people arbitrarily form positions on almost everything imaginable, and often the origin of that position is so flimsy and like having no value, but you just adapted to it, and now you just identify with it, like, and you can get really defensive
Yeah.
about it, even though the origin of it isn't even like you didn't even think that through. Really, it's just some arbitrary thing that happened that made you think that.
Yeah, you get like etched into it. You know, your brain does this through action potentials, neural connections, and I think neuroplasticity is like a metaphor for how psychedelics, I think,
I was
have
just gonna
helped
say that.
people to metaprogram themselves. You
Yeah,
know,
I was
I
just gonna
I
say that
always
sounds.
liked that idea, and then I found John C. Lilly's metaprogramming
Yep.
later when I was older, and it was just so cool because
Yeah.
that sort of stuff happens all the time um, in psychedelic culture and things that happen for me through my experiences,
Yeah.
people I meet through the experiences, all of the above.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. It just seems like because I've had the same thing happen a bunch of times where it's like I have this idea and like this general like understanding, just this idea, and then like I just come across like, oh shit, there's this guy who said like kind of that idea, like he got really deep into it in an amazing way, but like that's what I was looking for, someone who said that. Like it almost seems like your consciousness somehow organizes these confrontations where like it starts off as a negative thought within yourself.
Yeah,
You're like, oh, there's something in the world that talks about that.
yeah. It in irony and satire can be really insightful for that reason. You know,
Totally
when
agree.
you find that in your culture and your connections with other people,
Yeah,
the way that it
exactly.
presents itself,
Like the
it's a
onion,
cool story.
it's like the onion sometimes, like what I mean. And but it's just a reflection of sarcasm generally. But I'm just saying, like you can use sarcasm to say like the realest shit ever, and it's like,
Yeah,
it's nonsense. Like technically what you're saying, but it's like you use nonsense, and when you read it, it's nonsense. But then it's basically it's like it's based on the same fundamental logic that people actually have. So then the nonsensical like extremeness of it makes people realize like, oh wow, yeah, that is a nonsensical train of thought, isn't it? And then so then the real thought that people do have, you're like, well, that does kind of imply this. Like, that makes no sense if you think it through. Like, it's useful to take things to the extremes of the possible like deductions that you could make out of that
yeah.
premise, and then you're like,
I think
oh,
that
so the whole
that's what's
premise is
more
false.
valuable than the actual details.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Sometimes
I
people
agree.
get really
'Cause-
caught up in the details.
yeah,
Um, yeah, our culture kind of tends to take us down like rabbit holes like that.
yeah, and like the way I look at it, like I don't know, I've just had this sort of somewhat visual idea, like almost model in my head of how our mind works and our whole like experience of reality. It's like a logic tree, and it's just like there's a premise, and then there's just all of your thoughts and perceptions about that premise, and all associations you make with it, and then it branches off from there into the same thing. And it's just like we're just running through the way that this is all programmed. It's just this logic tree of if this, then this, and it's all according to
Yeah,
our
you need to
perceptions and
understand your own
ideas.
logic tree,
And
right?
what?
You need to
And
understand your own logic tree, and
exactly.
then do your best to understand like the greater picture. But
Yep.
also even more importantly is being aware of your blind spots.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's basically in my head, like, because I guess I was thinking when that idea was, in my head originally, I guess that was, like I said, that was the idea, and then I came across John Lilly metaprogramming, and I'm like, yep, that's what it is. That's what I'm talking about. And so I guess, and that's what psychedelics can help you with. Not the only thing, but you hacked into that tree, that logic tree that you have, and you can alter, like, you used to associate or deduce this from that, but if you give a certain level of energy to it and you apply it, you can break that connection and form a new connection, and that's all tied in with semantics and all that kind of thing. And it's possible to just alter and adjust the whole thing, and that is everything for you.
Yeah, pretty much. And so, I mean, I'm not saying like obsessively, you can't get caught up in it too, and that's what that paradox is.
Yeah, yeah, I have to agree with that because but it's that's a conflicting thing for me because I totally get what you're saying. Like you can go so deeply into it that it's like it's just kind of crazy, in
It's
depth,
kind of an
whatever.
intuitive thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think maybe the more you understand the general essence of it, like the more without thought. Like I think the answers, like what we're looking for, is in the subconscious. That's what I think. So it's not
I
about
do too.
consciously like doing everything. It's just getting in touch with your subconscious, which effortlessly makes all
And
these
you can
things.
still understand what's happening. And if you can explain that to other people in a way that helps them, then I think that that's what's important.
Yeah, if you're in that state of mind yourself, like this doesn't
Yeah,
always
sometimes
work.
the language you use really matters. Um, Yet at the same time, you want your intentions to flow through.
Yeah, well, that's what gets tricky because, and this is I consider it now to be a weakness. In some ways, it's a result of what I think is a strength. So it's complicated. But my issue I think is when I express myself, I try so hard to incorporate like all potential things that people would say against what I'm saying, or they would mischaracterize me. And so I'm like playing defense in my expression the whole time. Like now you might think that this means that, but actually, and I'm like preemptively like trying to avoid anything that I think is a mischaracterization. And so to me, I think I'm being nuanced in thought, which is like a good thing, but at the same time, it ends up being a weakness in your expression.
Yeah, so logic, and intuition. Um,
Intuition. Oh
I
yeah,
think I think that balancing those things is important. Just
yeah.
just understanding what that balance means, understanding where your own boundary is
Mhm.
with various things, especially insofar as how much of your own value you devote to things that you really don't believe in.
Yeah. Well, that's what like it's like we can
It
get
can be
caught.
difficult. It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you can. I mean, because you can become so like open, and then you can make mistakes out of there. You know what I mean? Versus, and then you can be too logical that you become very closed off. So, and that's, I mean, that comes back to it's one of the seven hermetic principles is polarity. That's like a age-old thing that like the truth is paradoxical. Like there's all these paradoxes that just play out in the world in our own psyche, and like that's just a part of the structure of reality, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and language definitely utilizes that mechanism, I think, in a way that is that's deeper than a lot of us realize
Mm-hmm.
or are like consciously aware of. And if you can understand that, and I know Terence said something similar
I was just
about
gonna say that.
language.
He said the
Yeah.
world is made of words. He said,
Mm.
which and I love, and that is honestly the perfect example of what I love about Terence McKenna. Because typically, it's in spiritual circles, the idea is the truth is beyond language. Like, words can't say the truth. That's the typical spiritual thing to say. That's like the assumption that you're supposed to say. So Terence McKenna said, the truth is made of words. People are like, what? Like, that's the
It's
exact
made of
opposite of what I've
words.
always heard. Um, and that's why I love him, because he just said, like, he knew there was any, like, he didn't deny the validity of, like, transcendence, beyond our understanding in language, but at the same time he knew there was some validity to this idea, like, whoa, our linguistic
Yeah.
models are forming this whole thing. So he wasn't just going to parrot like, oh yeah, it's beyond words. He's like, no, it's made of words, and because
Yeah. especially now with how many people are on the internet and how many people get like attach real significance to arguments that they have on the internet with people, and whether or not people are feeling insulted or not. And I think that there's a lot of stuff that happens in our linguistic processing that goes a lot deeper than we realize. And I think that when you're aware of that, sometimes it doesn't change you as much. Like people have been getting so angry over all of the political stuff, for instance.
Yeah.
And there's these like trigger mechanisms like almost installed throughout our experiences in language, and I think that it forces us to become more aware of that sort of thing, unless you want to piss people off or offend people or make them think that you're trying to hurt them even if you're not. And so we need to definitely, I don't know, either be aware of that, either I'll be aware of it or say fuck it completely. Yeah. But like we need to stop fucking around
both,
in the middle.
like it's both. I think it's like both.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
I don't like this whole and I'm not like saying I'm like extreme on it in myself, but I'm just saying this whole thing about like totally regulating your speech and always like you have to think about everything you say and like how you say it the exact right way. Like it gets extreme. And it's like we can't be so self-conscious and anxious all the time and like how we say everything. But so that's the true. But then also another aspect of it is like what you're talking about like these trigger responses or whatever. To me, that's like an emotional connection that you associate with the word. So you just hear that word and it just sets off this emotional thing, and then so it's like. And that it's so tied in with the emotion to the word makes it so that actually the logic is not even involved, because you can just hear the word and it doesn't really matter what the person's actually saying or where they're coming from. You just all of that is bypassed. You're like, you said that word, and people could actually be saying pretty radically different things or coming from radically different places, but so many people are going to have the exact same response because it's just this word is directly tied in with an emotion.
Yeah, and understanding those things also sets you free from it.
Yeah.
To a degree.
Yeah, that's why awareness.
I mean, it's easier said than done. Yeah.
Of course.
But,
Yeah. And you talked earlier about LSD being your favorite of the psychedelics, where you said LSD and DMT. But
DMT and DPT, maybe not LSD, sure, but that was like the first psychedelic that
was just one of the major ones that you used
often when I was younger.
Yeah.
DMT and DPT, I would say, are my favorite psychedelics.
Okay, well, let me, I'd like to get more into DMT. Like I said, I can't get into DPT myself, but I'd like to get a little more into DMT. First of all, let me say about LSD is that, so for me, with LSD, LSD is like the substance that brings out all this stuff we're talking about, I think, and maybe the fact that you did all this LSD when you were younger opened your mind to this train of thought, because when I take LSD, that is the thing that I become like so highly aware of. I'm like, whoa, everything that I'm seeing, the way the context that I give myself in life and my environment and the way I see and look at everything is just my own definitions. I'm just making all this up. Like it could be anything I wanted it to be, and I just see how obviously, and then there's this freedom thing where like things can appear in this like cartoonish, over-dramatized way, because it's like, hey, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be how you normally see it, and it just really shows me the relativity of my perception and how it's all based on my internal models and how there's such a wide range of what it could be.
Yeah, exactly. And I've always been interested in just kind of doing your own sort of like being aware of how the ways in which we do psychic brain surgery on ourselves constantly.
Oh, that's amazing that you just said that term, because that is perfect. Because literally, I had that brings us into DMT. That was one of the DMT experiences I've had. It was weird, and it was almost cartoonish and over the top and kind of crazy, but it was interesting, and it was like that, which is that basically it was like I was having like higher dimensional surgery done on me. And it was like, this is cartoonish, like the visuals of it were cartoonish basically, but it was like these nurses were doing this surgery on me, and I always, a big part of how I perceive DMT space is that like it consists of a bunch of slides. Like you can imagine like a two-dimensional, like from our perspective, it'd be like a two-dimensional square or plane or whatever, and you just stack them all on top of each other, and that stacking creates our environment. Like to me, that's what DMT space is like, but every slide or plane is like a reality model, and they all stack on top of each other to create DMT space. And these nurses were doing like surgery on me where they would like reach inside of me and they would pull these slides out and they'd chuck them to the side and then they'd grab another one and put it inside of me, and they were just replacing all these slides that make me up, and they were doing the surgery. And at the same time I had these like jokers or jesters, like stereotypical like hats with all these points coming out. It was all these colors, and they had the jingly little balls at the end, and I wouldn't see them, and then they jump into my view, and they're like, ah! And they'd jump into my view, and it was like they were just messing with me and trying to distract me. They'd make funny noises and do funny things. They're like, whoa, whoa, and then they'd disappear, and then they'd go out, and they just kept doing stuff like that as these nurses were doing surgery, because I'd like focus on the surgery, and then they'd jump out like, don't look there.
Was that a recent trip?
What did you say?
Was that like a recent trip, or was
that was not recent. It was months ago, maybe up to a year ago. I don't know exactly, but
yeah. Well, I know. Yeah, there's definitely that's what I like about psychedelics. Just I like that kind of awareness and revelation.
Yeah.
That being in that place where you're suspended and you are you exist within that paradox.
Yeah.
And you're choosing where you go. That's your person. That's your evolution.
Yeah.
Moment to moment, we're evolving every moment, and we're adapting.
Yep. And the thing that's one of the things that makes DMT so interesting to me is, in my experience, it can go such a radical variety of ways. Like the experiences are so different that I've had. It's like I can say one experience, but then another experience was so different. Like I just it surprises you kind of, because it's like you can't really put it in a box, because like you think it's one thing and then this completely different thing happens. To me, at least, that's been my experience. It's just gone so many different ways. I have sort of roughly, I guess, etched out levels to it, because I've noticed certain trends to like the type of experience and all that. I found, so to me, my favorite type of experience I've had, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, there's been times that I'm in this DMT space, sort of like how I described, but the big thing that defines this is it's like there's a mental there's a mental presence there, and we're just interacting with each other. It's like it knows, I can feel it, it can feel me, and I can like, it's in my head, and I can feel it, and I'm in its head, and we're just it's kind of communicating with me. It's nonverbal, but it's like it's saying things. It's not using words, but it's just transmitting understandings and thoughts. But it's really like it's like a casual conversation. Like he's like, there's this being, and he's like, all right, here you are. Let me take you on a tour around here. And he just takes me on this tour.
Yeah, what is the self and other?
Self and other?
Yeah, the self and other.
Yep.
Where's the difference? Like their psychedelic experiences make us ask that question.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the key
level.
things, key paradoxes, and like that's what, to me, that whole
and what that means for other people and like their feelings and their language as well.
Yep. We all, like,
Sorry.
that defines part of us is how we, like we were talking about, how we linguistically proceed from, the origin, the original thought impulse, it's, I've sort of, that's the dichotomy of self-other. When my sort of conceptual analysis of that whole thing in the DMT space, I break it down almost in terms of the classic like Trinity, because I look at it as like it's like like I'm the self, like you said, it's kind of self-other, and then there's also like this primordial matter, and that's what the environment is. It's this primordial matter, and it just shows me it's like the root of matter, and I just see it like radically transforms into all these different things, and it's like, wow, this can be anything, and that's primordial matter.
That's the wellspring of imagination.
Yeah. And it's so much more than just visuals, but it's just so funny because people talk about like fractal visuals like a lot, but when I've seen fractal visuals on DMT, I mean it's like okay, I didn't even know what that meant until I saw this. Like this was real fractal imagery. It's like no bullshit. It was just this every single scale, it was the same thing, and it was rapidly transforming into other things and just kept resonating at every scale, and I'm like, wow. It was like the most visually amazing, and everything did that. If I just focused on something, that's what it was doing, and I'm like, wow, this is the most incredible visual thing I've ever seen, and it's way beyond anything I ever thought when I thought fractals or whatever.
DMT kind of like pulls back the curtains, I think, like behind reality and the processes. When I say reality, I mean your own perceptual programs regarding things in your life and experiences you've had and being aware of other people's.
Yeah.
And
well, and it could be, if you talk about like, not that this may be the exact right wording, but Terence McKenna at times when he considered the possibilities of what might be, he said it was like, like the land or the collecting place of human souls or whatever, So it's like that's another maybe way of saying the collective consciousness, like all of at the high levels of our mind or spirit or whatever you want to call it, we all kind of collect at this core that's, so much of a higher level than anything we ever think, and, that's kind of what you tap into in DMT space. Maybe.
Yeah. No, I definitely, it's a good way to explain it.
Yeah.
DMT feels very much like home to me in some sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel necessarily like something I experience all the time that way, but it's like, between consciousness, between moments, between lifetimes, between thoughts, that's where we're at.
Well, that's like what
because it's definitely familiar.
Well, that's what's so interesting about, and whether you, like, I feel like if you had to think about what Terence McKenna must have been doing with his descriptions, he's like trying to find a linguistic way of saying the vibe of it, or like basically what it was, and just trying to find a way to say it. And because that's what I do. Like when I talk about what I was just telling you about with the mental interaction, like I make up words that he or it or whatever says, but he didn't say those words. I'm trying to tell you like kind of what he was saying. It wasn't with words, but that's what he was saying basically. And like that's what Terence McKenna talks about when he would go and there'd be these self-transforming machine elves or whatever. And
yeah.
They'd say, or no, when he was leaving, when he was on his way out, they would say, "Deja vu, deja vu."
The ability to unlock like self-transforming experiences.
Yeah.
I would kind of describe it.
I just think that deja vu term is what you're talking about because it's deja vu. Like, you've been here before. Remember? Deja vu. This is not a new thing. That's what deja vu is. Like, you've seen this before.
Yeah.
Remember?
The thing that always was like so out there for me is that every time I've been to that place, that specific moment that that we just referred to, every time I've been there, I feel like when I came back to this life, it was like I had forgotten all about it. Like I had moved beyond it, and then it would come back again.
Yeah.
And that's a strange feeling, especially when it really feels familiar to you.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that, and that's why, like, I don't know, I almost have to believe there's a way to connect those levels to bridge the gap somehow because it can be almost disappointing because you're right, you go there and you're like, oh, like this is the true reality. This is what it is. Like, all right, and in your head you're just like, oh, well, this is what it is forever now because this is just what it is. And then you come back and it's not really like as obviously like that as it just seems like, and you're like, well, that seems true.
You're working at your own translation of it. I know.
Yeah. Yeah, because I always, that's why, like, I feel like, well, like, a lot of this, to me, and we've talked about it before, and this relates to John Lilly, that's why I think I resonate with him, ketamine is another big one, and I think there's some resonance between the two, I mean, to me, because ketamine, honestly, more than anything, ketamine is what gives me the sense of coming home. When I'm come up on ketamine,
I've gotten that with ketamine, too.
I'm like, yep, there you are,
It's back. In a different way, though. It feels more logical. Does ketamine feel more logical to you?
I don't know if other people...
Yeah, like tryptamines feel like the intuition side, and dissociatives are like the logical side.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I agree with that so much.
And like both of them together is kind of like one of the the most like wholesome kind of psychedelic
I haven't done it
experiences.
yet, but that's something I need to do for sure. That sounds everyone, it sounds amazing. Like this is how I describe ketamine, and I've also wondered if other people see it the same way. But at least very often when I do ketamine, honestly, what it feels like to me, it's like I'm in a classroom with an advanced intelligence, and he's just like, all right, you're in class now, so this is how it works.
Yeah.
And it's not, and it's just like being shown to me like directly, like this is how it works, and then I'm like. And then I can just think about it, or I can just analyze it to this level where it's like I just know, I'm just seeing it from this higher level perspective, and I can just penetrate it with my mind, like, oh, this is really what's going on,
Yeah.
and it's all logical. It's all logical deductions. It's like I'm just working it out, and it's just the logic of it seems self-apparent, to where it's like you just analyzed in depth, you would have never even considered how it all works.
Right. That's kind of one of the things I like about DBT. It seems like it's a little bit more dissociative than a lot of other psychedelics. Like, have you ever done 5-MeO DMT?
That's what I have not been fortunate of doing.
5-MeO DMT is, I would say DBT is more similar to 5-MeO DMT than anything I've tried, but it's not, like it's dose dependent. You don't have to take like, a big dose and go all the way there or anything,
Yeah.
but it has a similar vibe to it. Like,
Uh-huh.
it's very ego deathy kind of
Yeah.
experience.
Well, as I understand it, 5-MeO DMT, it's more just the general essence, or maybe light, or just feeling, or vibe, or energy of being transcendent, more than like a crazy visual thing. It's just like this is the transcendental state. It's not a visual thing. It's just like that's the experience, the feeling, or whatever. It's as I understand it. Would you say that's accurate?
um, Maybe you should try explaining it a little bit differently so that I can make sure I understand exactly what you mean.
Well, it's not like it's less of a visual thing. It's more like you just have the
Oh
feeling
yeah.
of being transcendent, and like the ultimate state of being, and it might be like a white light almost or something, but it's just the energy, like the essence. It's not like holy shit, this is crazy.
There's very
Like
much a purity of it. It's like the other end of like DMT, which is like illustrating everything, making
yeah,
everything into some sort of an experience.
yeah,
And the 5-MeO DMT is kind of like that level of like basic. I don't know. It seems very pure, unadulterated. The mind isn't like turning it into things.
yeah.
And you might not even feel like you can, or that you would want to.
Uh-huh. Like yeah. So there's like a peace to it, right? Like you feel very peaceful or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. And so I would say DPT is kind of similar to, it has that sort of vibe to it.
Yeah. And,
But it's definitely also, it has that very tryptamine sort of
mhm.
feel to it.
Well, when you talked about associating DMT like with dissociatives to some degree, as I understand it, I don't fully understand it at all, but in a general way, I believe there's some sort of a connection between salvia and dissociatives. Like it
Yeah.
taps into certain receptors that are associated with dissociatives. I guess I don't fully understand it, but that's what I've heard, and that also kind of
Yeah, I think it is.
yeah, and that's like kind of it, when you said about 5-MeO DMT, it made me also think of salvia as far as dose dependency and stuff like that because, well, especially in terms of extract level. You said, I forget, you said you have done salvia, right?
I've done it, but I've never really fully broken through on it.
Yeah, okay, see,
And
and that's all I've ever done is broken through on. I've never had a lesser experience, and if you would not even think of this as the right way, but it was my first ever psychedelic experience was high extract salvia. I'd never done anything like it, and I had never even really thought spirit. That was before I thought philosophically and spiritually and stuff like that, and and I wonder how much of that provoked that I would start thinking that way because I just had this experience. It was not. I didn't know anything about what I was talking about. I just had this experience where I smoked the high extract, and it was an absolute breakthrough experience. Honestly, I have to say that my most intense breakthrough experiences I've ever had were on salvia. I mean, I think I would have to say because it was so. It wasn't like when I do DMT, I do ketamine, anything like that. It's like I do it, and I'm like, all right, now lay back and close your eyes and like let it happen or whatever. When I did salvia, it was just like, oh, you're somewhere else. Like that's it. Like I didn't close my eyes intentionally. I didn't do anything. I was just all of a sudden I was in a completely different place. And it,
yeah, like
I
changing the
couldn't, I
channel.
couldn't open my eyes. It's not like, oh, this is crazy. Let me just open my eyes. Like that didn't exist. There's no such thing as open or closed eyes. And you know, it was so terrifying to me at the time. It was probably, I mean, it has to be like the scariest experience I've ever had in my life. Um, but I was not philosophically or spiritually aware at the time, so I had never thought. All of a sudden, it was just telling me things that I had never even heard before, and I was just like, oh no, you're actually a molecule in this super being, and your whole life is a dream or a hallucination. None of it's real. This is real. You're a molecule in a super being. You pretty much have no free will because you're just going along with this super being, and like, you know, you just go with it, the movements of its body. And I never thought anything like that. I'm in high school, I'm like, what? And I'm like, it just scared
it can be valuable to learn how to enter experiences like that with acceptance, because then you can kind of translate that over to your own life sometimes in terms of your reactivity to it.
Exactly.
Psychedelics have definitely had shock value for me, and I don't mean shock value in, you know, like in the way I just described, more so.
Yeah. I badly wish that I could do, and it's so weird because it's illegal in like most of the country, but it's legal in some states, and so it's almost the closest thing to legal among most of these psychedelics. Yet it's like impossible to find, in my experience, anyways. Like I just can't get salvia, and I would be interested in trying it again now because, like you said, it was just so shocking to even have that shown to me. I'm like, what? And so just my reaction to that was just to be terrified, and to me, I was screaming. Like it was the scariest thing that had ever happened to me. But now I've like heard those ideas before. Like it's not like, what? This totally shocking thing. So now I'm just curious how I'd react now, because almost everyone says salvia is scary, but I wonder how much of it is a lack of philosophical preparation for the experience, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. And I think that having experience with other dissociatives and tryptamines too would definitely help. I don't know. Hopefully, I can use salvia at some point. Hopefully, I can experience it. Because I don't trip nearly as often as I used to. I went through a time period in my life where I was a lot, and I wouldn't be able to keep up that lifestyle. You know, it's just not.
Well, that seems to be the natural cycle. It's like Timothy Leary did it once a week. According to him, this is what it is. He did it once a week for like years and years and years. He just every week he did LSD, and then like you said, what he said is that at a certain point, you know, but after like years and years of doing this, at some point, after maybe like I don't know, a long time of doing this, he said at some point he was like, all right, now you're just fooling around in here now. Like, what are you doing? You're just playing. You're just playing around in here now. Like this is you know. There's nothing more. This isn't substantial anymore. You're just kind of fucking around. And and that kind of.
It's strange how entities will show that part of your behavior to you, especially on DMT. There was, you know, when I first broke through on DMT, I was really fascinated by it, and I started, you know, trying to visit DMT space fairly often. And I think that one of maybe like the fifth or sixth time that I did it in like a short period of time, they said, you know, wait 2 months to come back, and then they're like, oh, all right. They were like, all right, fine, 2 weeks. We really do want you here. Don't worry. But like, they basically didn't think that I would listen if they told me 2 weeks. I mean, if they told me 2 months.
Yeah.
So they were like, all right, 2 weeks.
Well, that's
that
so
was
interesting.
Pretty funny.
Yeah, the personal connection thing, like they talk to you, like that's what I mean. That's what's something interesting, and that's something about DMT. It seems like with the DMT, whatever, you know, whether you perceive them as an entity or a mental essence or whatever it is, it's this very familiar thing. Like, yeah, we're talking, like we know each other. This is like a casual conversation. Like there's something very personal about it. It's weird, but that's kind of been my experience too. And John Lilly, he had his own version of it with, I think it was with ketamine. It involved ketamine, but I guess it involved different substances and different techniques, but he kept going like really far out, you know, into the depths of consciousness or experience or whatever. He kept going really far out, and he had these guides or these entities that were always there, and he always went to this place, and there were these entities there, and it was like they were his teachers, and they would explain stuff to him and show him stuff in all these different ways. They would always appear in different forms to go with different experiences, and And for him, he love it. Like, you know, a lot of people say like, that's crazy, you can't do that. And obviously, I mean, it is crazy, but you have to respect the man for his, like, he might be the most committed psychonaut that's ever existed, like literally. Because I'm not saying this is, again, I'm not saying this is a good decision, but like, goddamn, at some level you got to respect it. The fact that, so for a long time, for like months and months, he would inject himself with 75 milligrams of ketamine every single hour, 20 hours a day, giving himself 4 hours to sleep. He'd wake up, he'd inject himself.
I admire the commitment.
And for months and months he did that. He just tried to live in a true ketamine dissociated ketamine state. And he's like, this is just how I live life now.
Yeah, that sounds like something I could have done in like a really like not so good timeline. Probably. Yeah. Or like if I had like no self-control over myself, just and if I didn't understand the importance of integration, I think.
Well, it's just,
you know, and at a certain point, I felt like I was integrating it, but really there was a lot more to come, and I wasn't aware of.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
It's just something, so like I just imagine, like, when you think about like he would just develop like insane, like awesome perspectives that he would just develop about what's happening in this world, and he would be always on ketamine. So to him, like, that was real. Like, this is what reality is. These crazy perceptions about like what might be happening. It wasn't just a concept for him. Like, he just lived his life. Like, yep, that's what's happening. It's a fact. Like, he had this idea. He had this idea that he was an anthropologist from the future, sent back in time to study this time in human history.
It takes a certain kind of person to want to, you know, keep going and discovering things like that.
Yeah.
It's definitely not for everybody. I know sometimes lately people like to say that psychedelics are for everybody, and I think that some people experience psychedelics in a way where they become very fixated and you know, megalomaniac.
Oh, it can. It's a mind enhancer. To me, that's what they do. Is they enhance or like extract, like make larger or make more intense whatever it is that's in your mind. So it can be anything. I mean, it doesn't. I don't like people when they think, oh, the effects just have to be good. I mean, I don't agree with that. Whatever your mentality is going to blow up and be more so. And people will often take it like it's a blowing up of your own perspective, but people will often take that as like, oh, I've just been shown this, and then they'll become like hyper vigilant about this perspective or this ideology, and they get like and really obsessive about it, and they feel like it's just like that's what psychedelics teach you. But really, it's a blowing up.
It's an important place for you to explore. Yeah. Wait, continue. Sorry.
Well,
I just think that's an important thing to investigate, to understand. Especially right now, in like just where we're at right now with mainstreaming psychedelics more. That's what hashtag mainstreaming psychedelics.
Yeah. I believe it.
But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where I think that you need to understand it and examine that and make sure that it's good, because there can be a lot of potential for things to become unbalanced and like culty, and people, near worshiping other people.
Well, that's what happens. I hate to be that guy, because I'm I'm not even about like what it sounds like I'm coming from. It's a complex thing, whatever. But I'm just saying that is kind of like what happened with Charles Manson and stuff like that. I mean, that sounds like that's what happened with him. Like, they were just using psychedelics, and he just was like, this is the truth, and this is what it is, and I'm the guy that's telling you, and they just were like, oh my God, that is, and they just got so into it, like these people got so committed to like whatever this guy was saying through the use of psychedelics, and that's just the manifestation of it. Like, your mind is
you get carried away with it.
Yeah, your mind is plastic. Like, that's what Timothy Leary said. It's an interesting, I guess, now I think about the thing he said. He said, psychedelics are he's like, make no mistake about it. Psychedelics are the most powerful brainwashing tools available on the planet. So they could be used against you, and you could just be brainwashed into anything, or you could use them to brainwash yourself and take power of your own mind and your own experience, and that's what's so interesting about the history of it.
Brainwash yourself.
Yeah, exactly, and that's so interesting about the history of it. If originally the government was trying to use psychedelics for like basically evil purposes. They're like, let's see if we can brainwash people and make them commit horrendous acts, and then they'll forget they ever did it, and like all this kind of stuff. Like, they were using it for basically evil purposes, and like seeing if they could mentally torture people with them and stuff like that. Like, it was not good. And then you had people like Timothy Leary and others saying like, hey, let's take this stuff and empower ourselves spiritually. and psychologically they're like, whoa, we can't have
Yeah,
that.
it's a
Come on
really
now.
complex. It's a really complex thing, and it's, nowadays we can be sure that the truth is floating around somewhere out there, but
Yeah,
it's like sifting through all that stuff,
yeah,
and how do we do that? And
yeah,
our information evaluation has changed because of the fact that we're all using the internet. We're not all more connected to like the greater whole. I mean, a lot
yeah.
of people are
The
enough
internet's a
for it
total
to
game.
make a
Well, the internet's a
difference.
total game changer, and sometimes like people want to be like, oh, nothing's changed or whatever, but I'm like, it's in the like, I don't think those people are tuned in because like, yes, it hasn't fully externalized in society yet, but if you use the internet, you see like, whoa, there's this huge movement where like huge mass of people are thinking in totally different ways that used to be like really fringe, like outsider kind of people that would think this stuff, and now it's becoming like a huge part of what just people think and assume to be true on the internet, and that's huge, and it hasn't fully manifested like externally yet, but you can see that that's happening, and the internet is why, and that's the foundation for what will be a revolutionary change, when it builds up sufficient momentum.
Hmm. Well, yeah, is that sort of similar to the whole time wave zero, and the
It could
Mayan
be.
thing? Because I've always kind of connected those things together. That maybe that's around the time where we reached like some sort of tipping point. I mean, a lot of the time when there's when mythology presents itself in your culture and in what's happening.
Yeah,
Um, I feel like a lot of the time you need to understand more like what the metaphor is underneath it rather than take it literally, but you
right.
can discover a lot of information there.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing about it, because if something like that is true, which I think it might be true, um, people will argue like, oh, well, that makes it so vague that it doesn't mean anything. It's like, how can you pinpoint like this date as the tipping point? Fair enough, but still, if you look at it from a bigger picture, like if we could look at it from the scope of like a few hundred years, and then say it plays out how we think it might play out, then like, yeah, it's not about one specific date, but you might see if you saw it from a few hundred-year window, like, oh, right around then is when things really started to change. Within a few years, like that. You know what I mean? That it was a important point. And like, so if you're like, oh, well, it's imprecise, like, okay, but I mean, that's interesting that from the major historical timeline, around that time, give or take, a couple decades or whatever, something major happened. I mean, that's interesting.
Yeah, history repeats itself in cycles, and I don't think there's really been what we have with the internet is unprecedented.
Yeah.
On some level, or at least if we did experience what we're experiencing now at any point, it would have been probably through like literal telepathy
Right.
um, or
Before
speaking a
culture.
different language, because it has to do with our language. It's the medium of our
Yes.
language.
Yeah, it's the new medium of language. And sometimes there's this term. I thought I forgot it, but now I think I'm remembering it. It's not that new of a term. It's been around for over 100 years, I'm pretty sure. But it's like the new sphere, and it's like it's like a form of the atmosphere, which is our mental content. Basically, it's the atmosphere that exists of the human psyche, basically. And so I probably read this, I guess. It just occurred to me as an idea. I probably read this. I don't know if it's original or not, but the idea is that maybe the internet is like a part of the process of concretizing the new sphere. Like there's this atmosphere, this
Hmm.
collective consciousness thing, and the internet is like a physical mechanism where it's starting to objectify in a way that it never has before.
Or maybe it could either be making it more concrete, like you said, or it could be kind of like admitting that we don't need it to be as concrete.
Well,
Sometimes it's hard to say sometimes, and I'm
well,
still
that's
kind of that's debatable for me.
You think
I'm
it's
still learning more
debatable in
about
terms of whether the internet is like an ultimately essential thing in the grand picture of things? Is that what you
that.
mean?
Sorry, what was that?
Are you saying you're not sure like whether like an actually objective technology like in the internet is actually key? Is that what you mean?
I mean, I think that I just think that it's kind of inevitable. At some point, it's just a matter of how it comes through, how
Right.
the energies come through, how the synchronicities align
I'd agree with that.
with
I
the whole
mean,
thing, the
it's
interaction.
it's in the nature of time itself, I think, maybe, and that's what the time wave theory is basically. Apart from 2012 and that specifics, the time wave, the basic theory is that the whole system of time is this object which exists outside the bounds of time, and the whole historical process is a concretization of this transcendental object. So it's all, the basic structure of it is already defined in the structure of time itself, and there's no getting around it. And like you said, it might manifest in different ways, and that's what time is these archetypal modes of expression repeating in different fashions. But nonetheless, there are these energies that exist within time, and they're going to manifest because it's built into time itself. I mean, that's the theory, at least. I think it's an interesting one that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that I should probably... What time is it? Has it been an hour? I feel like we've been talking on here for a while.
Well, we're at right now is 57:40, and then we had the little bit that we caught off, so it's probably like 52 or 53 minutes.
Okay, cool. Let's see. I'm trying to think what else I wanted to cover.
Is there anything else you want to get into?
Because we got into the internet, and Okay, I remembered something that I kind of wanted to say. If you want to just like fit this into it somewhere.
Sure.
But I think that, what our society and social norms tend to do is create a more distinct line between polarities in general. Natural polarities, things that we experience just inherently or very core, central to life, and the discrepancies between them get bigger.
Yeah.
And I feel like people are manipulated and their minds are changed this way. People become more angry, become more obsessed with labels and identities.
Yeah.
Isms, very specific like definitions for labels with people. Yeah. So I think that's happening, and like you were saying before, you don't want to like be that person to bring that up, but it's kind of something that a lot of people haven't actually realized yet, and so
right.
That's why. I mean, and that's kind of. I really don't want to sound pretentious here, but I can't understand not being able to see that.
Yeah.
By this point.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's you can clearly see in just the way society is how polarized we all are, and I think that comes back to the time thing. I think time's a pressure cooker. It's basically like it's as we escalate through the process of what time is, all the paradoxes get closer and closer together, and they manifest more strongly and intensely. It's like in the past, and not even that distant past, but in centuries past, it might be like, oh, over this 600-year window, human culture was like dealing with this.
So that's how the novelty is described?
Yeah, exactly.
Would you say that's how the... Yeah.
I would agree with that totally. So it's like in the past, it was like over like they'll say like, oh, over this 500-600-year historical period, like there's this big debate about whether it would go this way or go that way, and over 600 years, like we kind of figured out what direction that whole thing was going to take. And now it's like within 10 years, like there's all these major issues that we're trying to figure out, and like we're just not, we're less. I just think over time we become less like, oh, that's just what it is, and we become, like I said, that's the pressure cooker thing, where we become more, we feel forced to pick sides on all these available issues that are being thrown at us at a rate that they never have. And so it's forcing us to take sides, and that's making us appear to be very divided and emotionally reactive in that. But I think it's the resolution of the paradoxes that exist within the collective consciousness. So it's like, in the end, it's all necessary, because that's how we come to the conclusions that define the end of it all, which is the purpose of it all. That's how I look at it.
I do believe that. And I also think that if it's something that we believe in or that we have faith in, then we ought to put our effort towards that, because that there's definitely a balance you want to strike, between those like two sort of sides of the spectrum.
Yeah. Well, it's as paradoxical as anything else. So
yeah, precise.
I don't know if there's anything else you want to get into. I think we've had a great conversation. I've loved talking to you. I always love talking to you. We have great conversations. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to get into. Once again,
all right,
great
well,
talking
this has been
to you.
good.
Loved it. Appreciate
Yeah, it's been
it.
really good.
Yep.
Yes.
I'll talk to you later. We'll have to talk again. Like I said, maybe sometime we can do another episode.
Okay, awesome.
All right. I'll talk to you
Okay,
later.
good night.
Bye. Night.